If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it, New York.
You smell that, people? That is the smell of postseason basketball around the corner. This is EJ Stewart. This is Tommy Beer. We're talking Knicks basketball here on Orange and Blue Bloods, a New York Knicks podcast, Odyssey WFAN original. We got plenty to get to on this show. We'll be talking about the two big wins the Knicks got over the weekend. They defeated the Cavs on Friday in a barn burner out in Cleveland, and they came back on Sunday at MSG, beat the Wizards. Now they are headed to the postseason. We'll talk all about those games. We'll talk about what we can expect from this team now that they are officially going to be in the playoffs. We don't have to worry about the play-in situation anymore. And now the Knicks just one game away from potentially getting that 5 seed. So a lot of excitement, a lot of good things happening for the Knicks on the basketball court. And we'll talk about some things happening off the court as well. The NBA is set to sign a new CBA, a collective bargaining agreement that has some pretty big changes to the NBA landscape. We're going to be having an in-season tournament starting probably as early as next season. There are going to be some changes to the luxury tax threshold. There are going to be some changes to some requirements in order to win MVP, win All-NBA awards. So a lot to get to on this episode. I'm excited to do this one. Again, like I said, joining me is my co-host, Tommy Beer. Tommy, how does the playoff smell to you?
We got to have playoff basketball in the spring in New York City.
That's right.
It's a beautiful thing. And yeah, you know, they made it 2 years ago, and that was a good story. And it had been 8 years prior to that. But for the first time in a really long time, not only are the Knicks in the postseason, it feels like they have a legit chance to make some noise once they get there. A legit chance to advance the second round. And, you know, all bets are off if they can, you know, advance past the first round. So we'll see. A lot to look forward to. But first, let's recap how the Knicks got there, punching their ticket to the dance.
Let's get to it. So again, this is Orange Blue Bloods, a New York Knicks podcast, Odyssey WFAN original. It's a podcast you can get wherever you get your podcasts, including the free Odyssey app. Make sure you get the auto download feature on your streaming service so you can get these episodes every time we drop. Also, be sure to check us out on YouTube as well. You can find us on both the Odyssey Sports page and the WFAN channel on YouTube as well. So you can catch us visually on the YouTube pages of Odyssey and WFAN. You can catch us, you know, through all streaming services, audio for the podcast. So let's begin talking about these wins. So the Knicks are headed back to the playoffs after picking up 2 big wins over the weekend. Jalen Brunson, 48 points to power the Knicks to a win over the Cavaliers in Cleveland on Friday. Then on Sunday, the shorthanded Knicks came from behind to defeat a shorthanded Washington Wizards team, running away with a score of 118-109. The Knicks got a stellar performance from Jalen Brunson once again, who had 27 points in the win. But the bigger story from this one might be the performances of some key role players, some key supporting cast members of this Knicks team, starting with Quentin Grimes, who continues to shoot the lights out. He had 27 points in this game. Obi Toppin starting for Julius Randle, who is going to be out for the remainder of the regular season with an ankle sprain. He scored 21 points in the win. So big performance from those guys. RJ Barrett did not play in this game. He suffered an illness in the game, so he was unable to play. So Emmanuel quickly stepped in. He added 22 points, so quickly doing what he normally does when he gets into the starting lineup. So a lot happening over the weekend. Randall goes out for the rest of the regular season. He's going to be reevaluated for a sprained ankle in 2 weeks. That would line him up almost right before the start of a potential game 1 in the postseason. Meanwhile, Obi Toppin has been in the starting lineup, and RJ Barrett missed the last game with an illness, but they're expecting him to be back soon. So what did you learn, Tommy, from these wins the Knicks got without Julius Randle in the lineup?
Yeah, I thought it just kind of reinforced, you know, there have been a ton of great storylines this season, from Randall's reemergence and Brunson and, you know, so many of the other good players, you know, just, you know, ascending, you know, really, you know, kind of becoming what Knicks fans had hoped, the Knicks front office and coaching staff had hoped. And one of the other storylines was the depth of this team. Somebody goes down, the next man up mentality. Every team talks about it. Every coach talks about it. The Knicks have walked the walk when it comes to that, that cliche. They really have. And as we've discussed, the Knicks don't have one of those elite superstars in terms of, top 5 talent in the NBA,
Yeah.
one of the 10 best players in the NBA. As a result, they kind of have to rely on contributions from a well-constructed roster night in, night out. And one of the benefits of that is even when one component is missing, they have the depth and the all around, just kind of the ability to pick each other up that allows them to sustain success. We've seen when Brunson goes down, IQ steps in. RJ Barrett goes down, Grimes and IQ will chip in. And now we have Randall missing 2 games for the first time all season. Sunday night in a win against an albeit depleted Wizards G League team. Obi Toppin scores a season high 21 points. The Knicks have 4 players scored more than 20 points for the first time since 2018. December 1st, 2018 to be exact. It was an overtime win against Milwaukee. That was the night Mario Hezonja stepped over Giannis. That's what that game was known for. 4 Knicks with 20 points in that contest were Emmanuel Mudiay, Tim Hardaway Jr., Kevin Knox, and Damian Dotson. One, not only does that tell you how long it's been since the Knicks scored 20 points, 2, it's a reminder, not that any Knicks fan would take advancing the playoffs for granted, but a reminder of just what Knicks fans have had to root for. The Emmanuel Mudiay, the trying to convince yourself that Damian Dotson is going to be a star player, that Alonzo Trier is going to be the next guy that's going to be a legit starter in the NBA. Elfrid Payton is a quality starting point guard. All these other players and young guys and Frank Ntilikina and Frank Williams and Ronaldo Balkins, we can go on and on and on and on. The Knicks finally have the guys that can lead your team to sustain success. Quentin Grimes, 25th pick in the draft. You mentioned Grimes, and we'll talk about him right off the bat here because he deserves it.
Yeah.
Last 6 games, he's averaging 20.8 points, 4.8 rebounds, 4 assists, 4.8 made 3-pointers while shooting 52% from the floor, 50% from behind the arc. During the stretch, basically 2 weeks, he leads the NBA. He's tied with Klay Thompson and 3-point shooting, has a higher 3-point percentage than Steph and Luka Doncic and Klay Thompson during that same stretch. Even going back 10 games, he's right around 50% from 3. He's playing the best basketball of his career at the moment. IQ, we've talked about him. He's going to win 6 Man of the Year most likely. There's just, so many things about this team. Looking back on the season, nobody would have said that. Few people would have argued that the Knicks could win 46 games and all but lock up the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference with a week left in the regular season. In order for all those, because in order for them to be 13 games above 500 in early April, Grimes would have had to exceed expectations. IQ would have had to exceed expectations. Brunson would have had to exceed expectations. Julius Randle would have had to exceed expectations. Isaiah Hartenstein would have had to exceed expectations. Some guy they got at the deadline would have had to exceed expectations.
Yeah.
And Josh Hart has done that. And all those players have done that. So it really, truly is remarkable when you look back at the big picture, just how well everybody has played when their number has been called for the most part. You sum all that up, you throw it all in the blender, and you get a team that's 13 games above 500. Looks like they're going to lock up the 5th seed in a day or two. And it's just a fun, exciting Knicks team to watch that I think we're all appreciative we've had the opportunity to kind of have a front row seat for.
Yeah, it's something that I kind of teased on the last show, not knowing that they were going to win 2 games, obviously, and not knowing they were going to get such great performances from Grimes, great performance from Obi Toppin on Sunday. But I mentioned on the last show, I said, I hope that when they had over the Heat in the second half, kind of showed the entire organization, showed the coaching staff, showed the players, showed everyone, the fans, that the Knicks are not a one-man show. They're not a 2-man show. They're not an end-all, be-all with just Julius Randle, and that this was a good team. This was a deep team. This was a team that, if they played the right way, could win multiple ways and multiple styles of play. And that's essentially what you saw in these games, starting with that Cleveland game where, you tell me Donovan Mitchell has all those, makes his first 8 shots or whatever he made, and he's going off the way he was in that first quarter, and that the Cleveland Cavaliers couldn't miss a shot basically in the whole first quarter. They scored 47 points, I think. And you tell me the Knicks find a way to win that game, I would say it sounds pretty unlikely, but the Knicks showed that, hey, they can get up and down the court. They can play a much more faster pace, a more free-flowing pace, a more free-flowing way of offense when they're not so bogged down and just Julius Randle isolations or Randle Brunson 1-2-man game. They were able to get a lot more easy shots. They were able to get out in the break. They were able to get in transition. And we saw them just really kind of thrash the Cleveland defense. I know they didn't have Jared Allen, which was a big loss in that game. But the ease in which Knicks were able to score, in part, I think because they weren't so predictable, I think was very important. We saw that in that game. We saw in this game how a player, again, like Obi Toppin, a guy who's been, kind of marginalized because of his role, because of the minutes he's unable to get on the court. He can go out there, he can get 21 points and get them with pretty much ease. He's doing things out there that we didn't get to see him do as much. It looked like the players actually looking for him more on cuts and things like that. And you saw his production for the minutes that he played. I mean, you got 21? You got 21 points in 33 minutes, 9-15 from the field, 3 for 8 from 3. You saw the shot profile change a little bit. He did still take a lot of threes. We actually got to see him take a lot more twos when he plays in those short minutes. He only gets to really just launch some threes. And if they go in, he plays good. If they don't go in, he doesn't play well. Him playing with a different lineup, different group of guys, he actually able to provide more offensively in this game. So it goes to show you that, hey, the Knicks are a good team, and that if things aren't working one way, if Randle has an off night or things aren't going well, they could win in a multitude of ways. They could play a multitude of lineups. Some of these lineups we saw in this game, the game on Sunday, or lineups we hadn't seen all season, and they had some success. So I hope that this is a wake-up call to the whole team, to the organization, to the fans, that look, like, everybody's got to get on board. Everybody's got to be on the same page. And the Knicks, they're going to need Julius Randle to do anything in the playoffs. Nobody is foolish enough to think that that's not the case.
Well,
but it does show that from a game-to-game situation, they're going to have to adjust. And if some things aren't working, they can easily transform the way they play, and they can still win games against good ball clubs.
Yeah, don't say nobody's foolish enough, because you've been on Knicks Twitter long enough to know that.
Yeah, true enough. That's a very fair point.
that some people will. Yes, 100%. Knicks obviously want Julius Randle back for the first game. You're crazy. It just makes the Knicks a better team when you add an All-NBA player
right.
to the roster. If you have the choice, you take the guy that averages 25, 10, and 5. That being said, exactly to your point, this is a good reminder that they don't have to be dependent on their All-NBA player or their All-Star point guard. That there's, and we talked about it last week, there's multiple ways that and this is a way that the Knicks can improve. For instance, the Knicks were ranked 29th in assists per game this season, 22.8 assists per game. I think only the Rockets are worse. They dished out 31 on Sunday. The ball moves a lot more when Randle's not on the floor, because it has to, because they can't rely on somebody to score in isolation and bully baskets that Randle can simply overpower opponents and knock down threes. It's and the Knicks offense has been better than good all season. They've been close to great, near the top 5 throughout the year consistently. And Randle's a huge part of that. Him and Brunson, the biggest parts of that. But again, as we've discussed, that doesn't mean that they rely on that, because in a playoff series, now when games really matter, when it's do or die, if you're locked into one method and that method fails you, as we saw in that first round series against the Hawks, when Randle shot 37% from the floor and his numbers were way down from the regular season, the Knicks essentially had no chance and were stomped out in 5 games.
Yeah.
Now you have the opportunity. If that's struggling, let's switch it up. Maybe we'll go small. Hardenstein, have him facilitate from the top of the key. Let Grimes get more involved offensively, both shooting the 3 and taking it to the basket. So there's just a lot different ways. So that's as we mentioned in previous spots, the one silver lining you're looking for over this final week is obviously you want everyone to stay healthy, but continue to experiment with different lineups, different rotations, and kind of get everyone comfortable. Because again, all we know is that Randle's going to get reevaluated 2 days before the postseason. Right. That by no means guarantees he's going to be ready for game 1 that first weekend. So a lot of different, it's difficult to predict what might happen. So you put yourself in position to be able to succeed no matter what news you get from that reevaluation.
Yeah, and we will talk about the playoffs in a second. I get the impression, and no one knows for sure, but I get the feeling, knowing Randle and knowing, quite frankly, the Knicks organization and how they value guys being available, that they put that 2-week thing there because they're pretty much saying 2 weeks, we're going to look at it. And if he can move fairly well, we're going to throw him out there. So I expect him to be back, but you're right. It's not a guarantee. And I posted it on Twitter, especially. I actually posted it before, or not in the first quarter of the Cavs game. It definitely wasn't after. But I tweeted, I said, is there a chance that the Knicks could find a way to sit Randall's first 2 games in Cleveland, steal a game in Cleveland, and then come back, 1-1, Randall comes back into the lineup? Because we saw Dallas last season. Jalen Brunson went solo dolo going up against the Utah Jazz, a Donovan Mitchell-led team that was fully healthy. And they found a way to not just win 1 game. They won 2 games. Now, that was at home. So that was a little different. But they got 2 wins with Jalen Brunson running the show in Dallas without Luka Doncic. Luka Doncic was injured, I believe, also with an ankle injury. So seeing what I saw on Friday, I don't want to take too much from the game, but just seeing how versatile this Knicks team can be, and I think how vulnerable Cleveland can be, it just made me wonder, because you're looking at then a game 3 probably being now 3 weeks out since ankle injury, and you're thinking, any more time would be better than less time, and you think maybe 3 weeks would probably put them closer to being close to 100%. It did make me wonder that, do you maybe go into game 1 and say, well, hold them, and if we lose, maybe we put them out there in game 2 because we need them, or if we win, then we can say, all right, chill, we'll get you back in game 3, back at the Garden, back at home. I think it's going to be something interesting to follow moving forward.
Definitely agree, and especially if that game was if they play Sunday and then Tuesday and then they wait till Friday or the next Saturday. Sometimes you get those long gaps in playoff series. Definitely something to keep in mind. I will say, I'd be lying if it didn't cross my mind that what happens if the Knicks win those first 2 games in Cleveland somehow without Randall, and then come back and lose game 3, or that's Randall, psychologically, we know how temperamental that can be. Would he recover from that in the series? Would he recover from that because the talk that offseason would be fair or not, the Knicks are a better team without Randall. So that's a whole nother, so for that reason, let's say the Knicks win these final 3 games, so they close the year on a 5-game win streak without Randall, even though the games are, they're playing 3 bad opponents. Especially the Pacers, a team without Tyrese Halliburton. So for that reason, I think Randall's going to do everything possible to get back on the floor, just to prevent the even murmurs of, the Knicks are a better team without Randall in the postseason thing. I'm not saying that's smart. I'm not saying that's the right decision. I'm just saying, from what I've seen from the player and just human nature as we know it, I think that's something that has crept into his mind. I don't want, it's just the same reason why, all these Cal Ripken never set out a game. No matter how good you are, you're always afraid about that player coming in and Wally Pippin you. So that's what I think it's something in the back of the mind of Randall. But again, the Knicks have done a good job throughout, basically in Leon Rose's tenure, of not letting information leak out. So I would say, wait for a Woj bomb, wait for a Shams tweet to kind of get some insight into how the Knicks might be feeling, maybe a week before, the playoffs start. But we'll probably have to wait until the days before. And even then, I'm sure they're going to play close to the vest, because they want the Cavs to have to prepare. It's like, if you're starting quarterbacks, up in the air, you want and you have an option quarterback as opposed to a pocket passer, you want the defense to have to prepare for both guys. So obviously the Knicks are going to wait for as long as possible before they commit one way or the other.
And we've seen now 2 games, especially the last game against Washington, that the Knicks, Obi and Randall are completely different players. Obi can have a big impact in games, as we saw on Sunday. Is there any way, when Randall comes back, because he will come back at some point, is there any way the Knicks can find a way to unlock some of this stuff that we saw from Obi in these games when Randall comes back? Because we've seen that, Obi's impact has been, minimal at times, because he's been forced to kind of only be a shooter. Here in these games, we saw him last game. He had 4 assists in this game just now. Mitchell Robinson had 4 assists too. So all the bigs were really getting into action, moving the ball a lot better than we normally see. But is there any chance that we could see Obi be unleashed a little bit better? Now, I'm not going to say more, because I don't know if he's going to play more minutes, but maybe utilized better in these games when Randall does return.
Obviously you'd like to think so. I wouldn't hold my breath if I was a Knicks fan. We have a good sample size here. The good news is that once the Hart's arrival, I think, reinvigorated Obi and the Knicks choosing to facilitate allow Isaiah Hartenstein to facilitate more from the high post. Should get Obi some easy buckets off cuts and things along those lines. So, but again, it's difficult in 12 minutes a night, 13 minutes a night, 11 minutes a night to truly make a big impact, especially when they kind of camp him out in the corner. And if he's playing on that second unit, that's probably where he's going to end up being. So, would you like to see, an additional kind of ramped up Obi version 2.0 that we've seen, that we saw Sunday night? Ideally, yes, but realistically, I think with the limited playing time and just kind of the team structure, that it's not likely, but hopefully it's a little bit closer to this version of Obi than it was in the first half of the season.
Yeah, I certainly hope that's the case. You're right. I think Josh Hart has done a good job of kind of unlocking a lot of guys in the team, quite frankly.
Yep.
I mean, he's come in and he's really been a big impact. And we've seen almost immediately how much he changed the dynamic of the team. And he did leave that game at the end against the Wizards. He had also twisted his ankle. I don't know. Have you seen anything on how? I didn't see anything about being severe or anything, but
The Josh Hart situation?
yeah.
Yeah. So the latest we have, fourth quarter, he twists his ankle, his right ankle, goes down,
Yeah.
starts limping off the floor. The entire garden gasps,
Yeah.
everyone, you could tell like the volume drops down and everyone's a little more nervous. The Knicks PR staff sent out tweeted out about 15 minutes later, Josh Hart, his ankle had been retaped and he was cleared for return.
Right.
Obviously, he did not return to the contest. It was a blowout and no need to put him in garbage time. Same as you, I have not seen him. I didn't see him speak after the game. I don't think they made him available to the media. Tibbs didn't have much to offer because I'm sure they had to wait for the medical stuff. It sounds like, if the Knicks had a playoff game tonight, he could probably play.
Right.
That's certainly the situation. He was cleared to play last night. Who knows? Maybe the ankle swelled up on him. I would assume the Knicks give him. Knicks don't play again. We're recording this Monday night. Knicks Monday afternoon. Knicks don't play again till Wednesday night. I would assume the Knicks give him the next game off. Just to err on the side of caution, even if he's 100%. Because again, there's only 3 games left in the schedule. One of the goals is win one game to clinch the Knicks magic number, by the way, now is 1. So any combination of Knicks wins or either a Knicks win or a Nets loss, and the Knicks have locked up the 5 seed. One other thing just to note, so it certainly looks like the Knicks will have at least a 5 seed. Technically, they can still catch the Cavs for 4. That would require the Knicks winning all 3 of their final games and the Cavs losing all 3 of their final games. The Cavs play Orlando twice and then Charlotte. So that's certainly extremely unlikely, but technically still possible. And the other thing just to note, the Cavs can still catch the Sixers for the 3 seed. They're 1.5 back with 3 games to go on the Cavs schedule and 4 games left on Philly. So I believe Philly's number to secure the number 3, magic number to secure the number 3 seed is 2. So you'd assume that'll happen. And, the very safe assumption now is very likely it'll be Sixers 3 and then the Cavs Knicks 4-5. But that being said, Knicks still have to win one more game to secure a playoff victory, to secure the 6 seed, 5 seed rather, ahead of the Nets. So they'll try to win Wednesday night in Indiana. Maybe the last 2 games you'll see some Trevor Keels and Jericho Sims and Daquan Jeffries. So we'll see how that plays out. But obviously keeping Hart healthy and Brunson looked like he hurt his thumb a little bit on that one drive to the basket. Those are the type of things you want to avoid in the last couple of games of the season.
Exactly. Yeah, you want to keep everybody fresh, keep everybody whole as you get to the postseason, which is now official. So Knicks win this one, 118-109 over the Wizards. A Wizards team that I thought was pretty pesky, and Knicks didn't necessarily play their cleanest play in the first half, but I thought it really turned it up, especially defensively in the second half. So in just a few weeks, playoff basketball returns to Madison Square Garden. The Knicks notched their 46th win of the season on Sunday to earn a postseason spot with 2.5 game lead on the Brooklyn Nets. The magic number for the Knicks, as Tommy just mentioned, is just 1 game. The Knicks win or Nets loss, and the Knicks secure the number 5 seed in the Eastern Conference. Already secured a playoff spot. 5 seed will be clinched with just 1 win, whether it be a Knicks win or a Nets loss. So under the leadership of Leon Rose and Tom Thibodeau as the head coach, this is the second time in 3 seasons that the Knicks have qualified for the playoffs. The team missed the postseason in each of the previous 7 seasons before Leon Rose took over. So Tommy, a little bit more of a macro conversation here as the Knicks clinch a playoff spot. Is the season now already a success with the Knicks headed to the postseason?
No, I mean, yeah,
Interesting. Okay.
yeah, definitely not. Like, again, 2012, 2013, Knicks win 54 games. We out of nowhere, the We Here Knicks team advanced, beat the Celtics in the first round, advanced to the second round, lose to a very good Pacers team. Listen, it's cool. Start of the future, Mike Woodson, Melo, like everything's going in the right direction. Knicks win 37 games the next year.
Yep.
Thibodeau's first season, 10 games over 500, 4 seed, home court advantage in the playoffs. This is the start of something they're building. Knicks win 37 games the next year. Long story short, next season is not promised. Randall, a monster season this year. Does he regress? Does he somehow stay on that same plateau? We'll see. Brunson, I don't it's not possible he could play any better, right? Does he get injured? Grimes and Quickly, do they continue to play at the level they continue on their upward trajectory? The answer right now on April 3rd, when they're 13 games over 500 and everything seems to be going right, absolutely. That being said, and again, the Knicks, the beauty of the season is the Knicks are ahead of schedule. The goal was to kind of maintain status quo and while also building towards the future. Knicks are not only building, keeping their reservoir of draft picks and draft capital and young assets. All those young assets have improved their value by playing as well as they have, which makes the team a very tough out right now. So I say all that to say, next season's not promised. The future's not promised. The Knicks team as currently constructed has the ability to beat this Cleveland Cavs team in the first round of playoffs. So I think just, advancing to the postseason is not giving justice to just how good Jalen Brunson has been this season, to just as well as Randall's played this season, to just the complete two-way player that Quentin Grimes, although he's just 22 and in his second year of the NBA, has been these last 2 weeks. That IQ in his third NBA season is pacing 6th year. There's no guarantee that Mitch is healthy next year, and Hartenstein, etc. So you have an opportunity. There's opportunities in front of you. You need to take advantage of it. If they lose a tough 7-game series to Cleveland, does that mean that the season's an utter disaster? And of course not. But that being said, like to address your question directly, is this Knicks season a success just because they advanced the playoffs? My answer would be no.
Interesting. I did not expect you to go there, to be honest. I don't want to be a cop out here, but I think when I say it's a success or not, so I'm kind of copping out my own question. I think it does depend on like what happens in the first round. So my thing is like, okay, the way I kind of view the question is, if Knicks lose in the first round of the playoffs, does that like not matter? Does that mean the season is a success? I'd say, well, I think it depends on what happens. Now, coming into the season, I did not expect the Knicks to win a round in the playoffs. I thought that the Knicks making the playoffs was going to be a tall order. I thought that they could do it, but if they did, they'd probably be the 7th or 8th seed, having got in via the play-in tournament. So now that they're here, we've seen the season. I don't want to lose sight of what the expectations were and how these guys have improved pretty much tenfold, almost the entire roster. But I think because of what we saw in that Atlanta series 2 years ago, and because we saw a Knicks team that we thought should have been able to be much more competitive and maybe win in the first round, just get stomped by the Atlanta Hawks, it kind of makes you feel like, man, you can't go through that again. Like to have, that happen, then have the miserable 2021-2022 season happen, and then just get right back to just getting stomped in the first round. It'd be hard to try to spin that as some kind of success. Now, I think maybe you could still say, hey, listen, at least now this team, you actually have a point guard when you didn't have before. Now this team, you have a guy who you can, build around, a cornerstone. At least now you kind of know more of what your young players can be, as opposed to like even 2 years ago, where like, Quickly and Obi are rookies and RJ's a second-year player, and you're still kind of unsure. Now you at least have a better idea. I think you can still spin it and say, hey, at least now you know more of who you are. But it would be tough if they had that. Now, if they lose in the first round, a tough 6 or tough 7-game series, I can't say that that's not a successful season. Like, I can't. Like, to me, like, that meant that a team that a lot of people did not think to make the playoffs would have made the playoffs, compete against a team that at parts of the season looked like they were a title contender and took them to 6 or 7 games. And if they lose a heartbreaker in Cleveland or they lose a game 6 at Madison Square Garden, I would say, all right, tough pill to swallow. This is a team I think they could have beat. But at the end of the day, they do have a guy who is a superstar, or at least on the precipice of being a superstar. And the Knicks, we don't think have that guy yet. So I would say, long answer, I would say yes, I think it is a success, barring there isn't a playoff disaster, which I don't expect. Now, I didn't expect what happened 2 years ago, but I would be surprised if the Knicks got swept or lost in 5 games to Cleveland. That would honestly shock me.
Agreed. And yeah, it is important to note, I certainly I didn't predict the Knicks to win 46 plus games
Right.
this season. So if you would have asked me, prior to the season, if making the playoffs would have been a success, I would have said yes. Even if you asked me in one of our podcasts on a Tuesday afternoon in July, when we're looking at free agency, was the last season a success, even if the Knicks, lose in 5 games or 6 games, I will say yes. I just think, as we've talked about in previous pods, like you recalibrate your expectations based on how the season's gone. So that's just kind of my point. Just looking ahead, the Knicks have a really good opportunity opponent, and just the storylines and the health of the team is relatively healthy, assuming Randall can come back and play in the postseason as well. Like these opportunities, the stars aligned this year. So you really want to take advantage of. It was kind of my overarching theme.
Yeah, no, and I totally get that. And when it comes to the Knicks, ceiling or what we expect, I mean, nobody that I don't think thinks their ceiling is making it to the NBA Finals. So to me, people will parse on. I've said conference finals. I know you said mostly second round. Other people I talked to have said second round. Some people have said conference finals. How do the Knicks get beyond that level? Like, regardless of whether it's 1 round or 2 rounds, like, what is the next step to the Knicks saying, hey, like, we're not just a team that could win a round or 2. We can get to championship, or at least make it to the finals if we don't win an NBA championship. Like, the way I look at this team, and I've said it, on WFAN hosting, sometimes, and maybe I'm crazy, but part of me just feels like it might just be just time. And I'm not, I do think it's very important to not think that, like, if you just kind of stand pat, that things will just end up working out for you in the end, because oftentimes it doesn't. You got to be aggressive and, be aggressive in reshaping your roster and continuing to evolve your roster. But I look at the Milwaukee Bucks. I see an aging roster, a dominant team, but an aging roster. I see Philly, and I see some flux. They have, star players, but I see Harden kind of, getting up there in age. I see some guys going to be coming up on contracts, a guy they're going to have to move. I see a coach who I don't know how much longer he's going to be there. And I say, how long are they contenders? I expect the Boston Celtics to be contenders as long as they got Tatum and Brown. And I expect Cleveland to be around and be one of the top teams in the East. But it just feels like in 2 or 3 years, the Heat they're not going to be anywhere near this picture, and barring some crazy free agent signing, which could happen. We've seen that in Miami, obviously, before. But it just feels like there's a vacuum that's being created in the East, where some of these teams that we just think are going to contend forever won't. And I kind of wonder if the Knicks, they continue to build the right way. Maybe they get another star in here. That in 2 years, we're not talking about the Knicks competing for a championship, competing to be one of the title contenders. Like, do you see that the same way, or do you feel like it's going to take something a little more desperate or a little more extreme for them to get to that point?
No, I agree with you for the most part. You talk about Milwaukee. Yes, they're aging roster, but Giannis is still in the heart of his prime, and Holiday's a little bit older, but still has a couple of years left. So putting them aside for a moment, because assuming Giannis stays in the East and stays in Milwaukee, I think the Bucks are going to win the championship this year. I think they'll be the favorites heading into next season. But putting them outside of that. Philly, Harden's going to be a free agent this year.
Yeah.
He's been good this season, led the league in assists. So I'm not going to say he's played poorly, but I don't think it's quite lived up to expectations that Sixers fans had hoped. Looks a step slow defensively. Are talking about the team's better when Maxi's, kind of running the show and games that Harden's missed. And again, Harden's going to be a free agent this summer, and it's talked about going back to Houston already. Yep. So is he committed to Philly? I don't know. I would short the Sixers stock if I could. Celtics, you assume good young coach, Tatum, top 5 MVP candidate, and they keep, Brown and Tatum together. Question is, are they going to keep Brown and Tatum together? Everything you read about, leaking out of Boston is Brown's unhappy, the city and the franchise. They dangled him in the KD talks. He's a year and a half away from free agency. How does that play out? Do they trade him instead of losing him in free agency? Does he go back home to California? All those things are up in the air. The Heat, the Hawks, who knows? The Heat will, the Hawks, a year ago, you would have said they're in a position to be a top 3 team. We've seen them take a huge step back. Maybe Quinn Snyder gets them back on track. Heat will try to rebuild, but I think that you could make an argument, if you're looking 3 years ahead, that the two best teams in the conference, depending on what happens with Giannis, will be the Cavs and the Knicks, which is another reason it makes the season so interesting. The
Yeah.
upcoming series, so interesting with the Donovan Mitchell. And one other thing we'll talk about with the new collective bargaining agreement is the fact that you can have more than 2 rookie max contracts on the same deal, which for the Cavs is important because they have Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, and now they're going to have to re-up Mobley at that max number. So they've benefited from one of the tweaks to the collective bargaining agreement. All that being said, let's hope that the Knicks are in that conversation in a few years. And so to directly answer your question, what the Knicks will have to do, first and foremost, is they have to that ascension assumes that the players will continue on their current trajectory. Quentin Grimes, who's played terrifically these last 2 weeks, continues to get better. We've seen him kind of dip up and down over the last few months. He's gone into slumps and not had quite the impact as he continued to get better and better and better. Does Emmanuel quickly continue to play at this same level, a six-man caliber talent? Does Jalen Brunson, is it possible that he plays as well next season as he does this year? I would argue yes. The beauty of Brunson contract as we look at it now is it's actually descending in value, which incredibly means that he's going to be paid less next year than this year. Also, even though he's also in the harvest prime, and he's even a guy that's 31 years old, he's never been a player at age 25, 26, what he is now. He's not relying on quickness or speed or Russell Westbrook athleticism. He outthinks you and footwork and outmaneuvers you and gets you off balance and scores on you. So he's a player that, unlike many point guards we've seen in the NBA, he has more of the Chris Paul trajectory than a Russell Westbrook kind of player. But again, it's all, does Mitch Rob stay healthy? Again, all the question marks that we had coming into the season, because all those boxes were checked this year, doesn't guarantee that they'll be checked next year. As we've talked about with the We Here team and the Randall, number 4 seed year team. In terms of roster construction, I think I don't want to call it an extreme move, but if there was one big move that would bump the Knicks up a tier that I think will be very seriously explored this offseason, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about it after this season ends, is what to do with RJ Barrett. I think the quickest way to leap in terms of relevance and competitiveness and legitimacy as a title contender is to turn Barrett and some draft capital into an upgraded piece at 3 and D wing, an OG Anunoby, depending on your feelings on him, a Mikal Bridges type player. They're not going to get Bridges, who's been a wonderful addition.
Been a star in Brooklyn.
A star in Brooklyn. That type of player where he's maybe an underappreciated tertiary piece on a title contending team like the Suns. You bring him to New York and give him a bigger role alongside Randall, alongside Brunson. And I didn't even mention Randall piece. We saw him go all NBA to the least efficient player in the NBA to all NBA. What happens next season? Again, all these questions are up in the air. So it's hard to commit hardcore to the Knicks are here and they're here for good. There's certainly reasons to believe that's the case, but there are reasons to be pessimistic as well. In order to kind of cushion that fall, you would assume, these guys coming back down to earth a little bit is upgrading that small forward position, because RJ Barrett, while he's had his moments and still has an opportunity to prove himself in a playoff series, the most important series of his career to date, I at this moment feel, and I have felt for this season, that he's been holding them back in certain respects. He's been an inefficient, he hasn't been a net positive this season. So if you could get somebody that's a significant net positive, most especially on the defensive end, because again, the Knicks are a top 5 offense with Barrett struggling immensely on the offensive end this season for large chunks of the season, even though he scored 20 points, high usage player, low true shooting percentage, not an ideal combination. If you get one of those 3 and D guys that can kind of, that's a perfect fit in between Brunson and Randall. And now you have 3 and D wing, Grimes alongside Brunson, Randall, Mitch Robinson. That's a really strong starting 5, assuming they re-sign Josh Hart. Then you have arguably the best bench in basketball with IQ, Hartenstein and Hart all signed for at least one more season. There's a lot to like there.
Yeah, there's several options they can do. You mentioned Julius Randle. and his value is, now hopefully it doesn't tank with a poor playoff performance, but his value is also sky high. Like, does he get moved for a guy who's a star? Because I almost feel like the Knicks could be in that Raptors pre-Kawhi situation where they may need to take one of these guys that they currently have. They need to upgrade this position. And whether it be, I'm looking at either RJ, looking at Randall, even looking at Mitchell Robinson, compared to what happens with some of these centers. I mentioned Joel Embiid before. Something about that situation is I always wonder how long he'll be there, especially if they have another postseason flop. Those three positions, the key positions, I can look at it and saying, if they trade one of these guys and they turn that into an upgraded piece, maybe even a superstar, I think the Knicks, now you're talking about, they're a true title contender. I really think that move will happen sooner than we think. Like, I think that move could happen this summer.
I definitely think that move could happen this summer, but now, because of the past 6 months, most specifically the last 3 months, 4 months, the Knicks are in a position now where last summer it was trade for a superstar, get any superstar, try to get relevant. Now the Knicks can be picky. Now they shouldn't trade for Zach LaVine.
Yes, they cannot trade for Zach LaVine.
You know what I'm saying? Like that type of player. In other words, if Karl-Anthony Towns was available last summer, yeah, let's get him. We'll figure it out later. Now, is Karl-Anthony Towns an upgrade over Randall? If you give up Robinson and Randall, or some combination thereof, does it make sense? The Knicks can get a little bit, can pick and choose their right star. So that's why I say it's not necessarily the first superstar that's up for grabs, which isn't something the Knicks have had the luxury of even discussing in years past. Now they can try to find the right piece, and that right piece may not be the guy that's, the 25-point scorer, but a guy that's averaged 17 and 2 steals and shoots, 43% from three.
I know one thing. This is going to be a very interesting couple of years coming up for the Knicks. I don't think that this is a flash in the pan this season. I think that the Knicks are entering a era where they'll be a perennial playoff team, and the moves they make now are going to be so important because they could be the difference between whether or not they can truly contend for a title, or if they're the Joe Johnson Atlanta Hawks and they're a team that's just in the playoffs, and maybe one year they do really well in the regular season, but a team that can't seriously win a title. I think that is going to be very important to watch over the next couple of seasons. But the Knicks are in the postseason, so rejoice, be happy. It should be a fun time in April here, watching Knicks basketball in the postseason. But let's wrap the show quickly talking about
100%. Just one quick thing, and then we'll get the CBA stuff. Yeah. The other thing about the guys playing good, IQ and Grimes, now you got to pay them. Like the guys that play good. So all that stuff gets factored in. Do you make your move while you still have cap space to spend? Because you're going to have to ink IQ to a big contract this summer, and then Grimes is going to be up, and then you got to decide what to do with Obi. So just one other thing. Thankfully, we'll have months to discuss that this offseason.
Yeah.
Now we need to focus on the playoffs.
Yeah, it's going to be very important. I saw Jake Fisher say that he doesn't think IQ will sign an extension this offseason just because of how well he's playing. And I couldn't blame him if that was the case. Yep. So, yes, definitely very important to see what the Knicks do moving forward. But let's move on to some important news in the NBA. So, the NBA and the Players Union came to terms on a new collective bargaining agreement that includes some noteworthy changes to the league moving forward. A new deal is expected to be ratified this week. So, one of the big additions includes the inclusion of a NBA in-season tournament. That will be included into the regular season. So teams will still play 82 games. The team that plays the championship game will play 83, but that won't count towards the record. The event will include pool play that will then be followed by a single elimination 8-team tournament. The Final Four will be held in a neutral site. Right now, it sounds like Las Vegas will be the leaders in the clubhouse as of right now in terms of where this Final Four will be played when it comes to the in-season tournament. The winners of the tournament, the coaches and the players all each will get $500,000 as a reward for winning the tournament that's going to be included in the NBA regular season. So there's that. There also will be some new restrictions for the teams that exceed the highest luxury tax threshold. So right now, that's the Clippers and the Warriors at this point. Teams that blow past that new salary cap apron that's $17.5 million above the luxury tax line. Those teams will have a bunch of restrictions that include being unable to sign players in the buyout market, unable to use the taxpayers' mid-level exception, can't attach cash to trades, can't trade draft picks at 7 years and beyond, and plenty of other things as well. You can't take in more money than you're sending out. So some pretty harsh restrictions for teams that hit that highest luxury tax threshold. There'll also be some new spending and trade opportunities for teams who aren't in that threshold. Both teams that even at the luxury tax, especially for teams that are below the salary cap and above the salary cap and not hitting the luxury tax threshold. So bigger opportunities to change your roster if you don't hit those high-end thresholds. In an effort to keep star players on their respective teams, franchises can now offer max extensions of 140% raises from your previous salary. So essentially, that's a 20% increase. So players like Jaylen Brown, players like DeMontis Sabonis, these guys could get more money to re-sign with their teams if they do so. And one of the other things I thought were important, you can now have 2 more max slot. You have more than 2 players on your team as super max guys, which Tommy talked about when it came to Cleveland. We'll have to re-sign Evan Mobley coming up. And to curb load management, players will now be required to play at least 65 games to be eligible for regular season awards like MVP and all NBA teams. So I think for a lot of people, we've talked about the importance of making the regular season matter. So I guess we'll start there, Tommy. Do you see the in-season tournament? Do you see the new requirement for the regular season awards? Do you see that at all helping improve the competitiveness of the regular season and curb load management?
I'm not excited about the in-season tournament. I could be wrong. Adam Silver and company have done I wasn't sure about the play-in tournament. It has been a huge success on so many different levels. So I was wrong about that. Maybe I'll be wrong about this as well. It'll be fun. It'll be exciting. It'll be somewhat interesting. But I don't think just having strictly money on the line is going to motivate players to in this day and age, these millionaire athletes to go crazy and put a lot of, a lot at stake on these tournaments. But the thing I really do like is the tying at least 65 games played to the regular season awards. I think that'll go a long way in the load management, because it's not so much load management for the other guys on the roster. It's if Giannis comes to your town once a year, you want to, when the Bucks play, you want to see Giannis. If Philly comes to your Western Conference team, you want to see Embiid play. So it's that type of stuff that I think it'll be less common, and that's a good thing for the game.
Yeah, I definitely like the regular season award requirements, because to me that's how it should have always been. When we've seen guys, I mentioned with All-Star games, guys don't play a lot of games and also find a way to make their way onto the All-Star team. So that with Paul George this season. And I think while I think it's important to note that a lot of the load management stuff comes from teams, it's not necessarily players coming around saying, hey, I need a day off. A lot of times it's a team saying, hey, you're not going to play. I do think it'll be a lot harder for teams to convince guys to sit when these guys are up for MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, making an All-NBA team. These are important notes. These are things that some of these awards impact these guys' money. And it kind of becomes an interesting deal with like kind of what we see in the NFL, where meeting certain thresholds can mean certain bonuses, and players get upset because maybe they don't get the ball on the 1 yard line when they need another touchdown to hit a certain threshold. So that's going to make it a lot more interesting. There may be even more contention among certain teams if we get close to a situation where guys will be ineligible to play or to win an award because of load management. So I think that's a good thing. I like the in-season tournament. I do think that I wish there was something better on the line besides $500,000. I think that's a lot of money. I think that teams once they get to the Final Four, like they're not going to want to lose. I think they will play relatively hard. But I wish it would have been something that made it an incentive, especially for the teams maybe who aren't that great, or teams that aren't teams that are going to win championship, to also like go for it, because maybe you give them an extra lottery pick. Like I thought, like to me, the best thing would have been to like, if you win the tournament, you get the like middle of the odds lottery as an added pick in the draft. And like to me, like now every team is going to be into that. The teams that are the lower end teams, like they have a shot because it's not necessarily playing an 82 game schedule. You just have to play good for a couple of weeks. Like I think that would have made it more interesting. I also think maybe guaranteeing a playoff spot would have been interesting, because maybe that would have turned the season upside down if a team that has been one of the worst teams in the league wins the tournament and now they have a playoff spot and now there's one less spot, kind of what we see in March Madness with the bid stealers that happened in the conference tournament. So I thought there was some more creativity they could have had. I think that stuff will come. I don't think they want to turn everything upside down so quickly. So that's why they start with money. But I think those other things will come eventually. But I'm cool with the single season, the in-season tournament. I'm interested to see how they're gonna figure out the schedule to make it to where every team still plays 82. That'll be interesting to figure out. But I think that's a cool addition. What did you think of the stuff with the money and the taxpayers? I thought that was actually one of the more interesting things, because some of these teams like the Warriors and the Clippers are gonna have to make like decisions like next year. like they're gonna have to cut salary almost immediately, because some of these restrictions are extremely harsh. It's gonna be very hard to build rosters if you hit that threshold.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I don't have a problem with it. I like kind of squeezing teams in the middle, increasing competition and parity and all that stuff. As we know, obviously, when KD went to the Warriors, I don't want to say it ruined the NBA for 2 years. That's far too strong a word, but there really wasn't competition. It happened to coincide with the salary cap spike coming from the new deal. The other thing to mention, in the new CBA is they're balancing, they're leveling that out, so it's not one specific. It's not 1 year where it's going to spike from 1 year to the next. So that'll prevent kind of the that crazy year when we had Mozgov and Joakim Noah.
Yeah, I would say just prevent the Knicks from doing another Joakim Noah deal, because that's something that's still
and or the Lakers giving 144 million to Mozgov and Luol Deng and
yeah,
craziness that followed. The one other thing I do want to mention, two things actually. One, I think you'll agree with, the All NBA eliminating positions. I have a problem with.
I don't like that. Yeah,
for the 75-year history of the league, we've been able. The All NBA team has been an important measuring stick in terms of greatness and Hall of Fame resume. That's no longer going to be the case. I assume you're on the same page as that.
Yeah, I don't like it, because all these moves seem to go against centers, and I don't think that centers are not important in this league. And actually, they seem to be on a new renaissance. Quite frankly, I mean, the two leading candidates for MVP the last 2 seasons are centers, essentially. Right. And so, I don't really get that. I think they should have kept it the way it was: 2 guards, 2 front court players, forwards, and then make it a center. So I didn't really love that. I agree. One of the other things I also thought was interesting, that I saw this come across, and I really thought it was an April Fool's, and I was always afraid to even talk about it still, but it is a thing, that players now be able to invest in NBA and WNBA teams. They can also invest in gambling and cannabis companies. Cannabis companies I care nothing about. The gambling is a little interesting. I'll hold reservations about whether or not that's a big deal yet. But the investing in teams thing seemed pretty crazy, because I didn't see anything from Sham saying that it had to be your own team. Even if it is your own team, how does that impact free agency? Will guys be able to have the carrot of saying, hey, you sign with my team, we'll give you, 5% investment stake? How does that work? That seemed crazy to me. Now, I like the fact that NBA players can invest in WNBA teams. That seemed cool. But the investing in NBA teams thing sounded very weird, because there wasn't much details outside of that they can do it.
100%. I need to see more on that. I agree. That was odd. I'm not sure how, because there's a lot. There have a lot of rules in place now, so teams and players can't collude to circumnavigate the salary cap. In other words, you can't sign Kevin Durant to a minimum salary contract and then give him 25% of your franchise, so you can sign 10 guys to 10 other guys to value exceeding their contract. So there's a lot. I'm not sure how they're going to work that out. I guess we'll just have to wait for further details. And the gambling stuff, I think there's going to be. They've gone from pretending gambling doesn't exist to now they're completely in bed with the gambling companies. Every other commercial on MSG is FanDuel. They're on the floor, on the uniforms, the arena names. It's gone to the other extreme now. I think there's going to be a swing back to the middle, because some players going to get caught up in the Calvin Ridley situation where they're innocuously betting on games, but are betting on their own teams. You really got to be careful, because and the reason teams and the reason owners took the Calvin Ridley suspension was so strenuous was because the one thing you can't have is fans questioning the integrity of the outcome of a game.
Yeah.
Once that comes into question, and even if it comes into question a little bit, really impacts fans getting invested. The one other thing I'll say about the CBA stuff, and I think the most important, and to kind of wrap up the conversation from the previous segment, is the increase in the franchises offering an extension of 140% of the player's current salary.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be enormous in how the Knicks construct this roster going forward. First and foremost, Josh Hart. Does that now enable the Knicks to sign him to a 4-year, 3-year something extension this offseason, instead of him opting out and then hoping that you re-sign him via when he becomes an unrestricted free agent? Even though the best laid plans, Hart loves New York loves Hart.
Right.
Don't worry, I'm going to opt out because my agents are telling me that's what I have to do, but I'm going to come back here. And then Portland offers him $70 million. The Knicks can only offer him 40. There's just a lot of stuff that can get in there you want to try to avoid, but not only Hart. Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson has a player option on the final season of his current contract.
Yeah.
He will obviously, of course, opt out unless he's willing to sign the Knicks, sign him to the max that they can offer via an extension, which would have been far too less, 6 days ago. Now with that 140%, maybe that's enough to talk him into, with an increasing salary cap, another reason why I'd want to opt out. But maybe that's enough to convince him, because clearly he's benefited from the New York situation. New York has benefited from his presence. They'd like to stay together. His coaches, his father's on the coaching staff. Maybe that's enough to kind of reduce the incentive to hit unrestricted free agency. So those are things that kind of were bylines and little small bullet points, but could have a huge impact on two very important players on the Knicks.
Yeah, that's going to be a very important thing to follow on how that impacts some of the Knicks negotiations with some of their own players. But that's going to do it for this edition of Orange and Blue Blood. Thank you guys so much for checking us out. Tommy, let people know where they can find you.
At Tommy Beer on Twitter.
You can find me, EJ_Stewart on Twitter, Action EJ on Instagram and TikTok. Thank you guys again for checking us out. Of course, you can catch all these episodes of Orange and Blue Bloods on any download streaming service you have. So you want to catch this podcast where pretty much wherever you get your podcast, including the free Odyssey app. Make sure you hit the auto download feature on your streaming service so you can get these episodes every time we drop. We'll be dropping another one on Tuesday, so make sure you guys have that auto download feature ready so you can have it as soon as we release it. Also, be sure to check us out on YouTube. You can catch us on the Odyssey Sports page and also the WFAN YouTube channel as well. So that's going to do it for now. Thank you guys so much for checking us out. Congrats to the Knicks for clinching a playoff spot. For Tommy, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.